In this video I'm going to show you how you can add your own digital snow to your pictures after you've taken them using Photoshop Elements. So here I've got a very snowy scene, but what I've actually done is added some snow to it in Photoshop, and we can see in my layers panel I can just turn these top two layers off, and that is the snow layers disabled. We can see that we've just got this wintry scene here. So what you're going to need for this technique is a wintry landscape or portrait, and I've got this image of a climber which you'll find on your resources folder that you can use to nail down the technique. And then the other thing that you're going to need is the snow brush that comes free with this issue, and you'll find that in the resources folder on your disk or download as well. So I've got this climber image open. I'm just going to delete these top two snow layers, and then I'll show you how you can do it to your own images. So once you've opened up your picture, you're going to need to head over to the brush tool in Photoshop Elements, and then click on this part that says brush, and then click on this little button to bring out the flyout menu and choose load brushes. And then in your resources folder you'll find the snowbrush.abr file, and you just need to click on that and choose open. Now if we take a look at our snow brush here, we can see it's kind of these two oval shapes, and that's going to help us create a random effect with the snow as we apply it, but we need to tweak it before we can start adding the snow to our shot. So we'll click on brush settings down in the tool options, and then what we're going to do here is drag most of these sliders to the right. So we're going to drag fade all the way to the right. By default these sliders should be about here. We're going to drag fade all the way to the right, scatter all the way to 100%, spacing all the way to the right, and also roundness. The only one that you don't need to worry about is hue jitter. You can leave that at 0%. And then to start with, I'm going to keep the angle at 0%, but after every few brush strokes we'll actually randomize that so that it makes the snow a little bit more natural. So before we start painting the snow onto the shot, the one thing that we need to do is create a new layer for it. So we'll go to Layer, New Layer, click OK to the box that appears, and this will just mean that our snow isn't being painted directly on to the original image. So I'm going to hit D followed by X on the keyboard for a white foreground colour and use these square bracket keys to resize. And I'm going to paint snow onto two different layers. One of those layers is going to be quite big snow particles, and the other one's going to be smaller ones, so we get a bit of texture and depth to the image. So not all of the snow particles are the same size. So we'll start off with the big snow particles layer. So again, use the square bracket keys to resize. I'm going to use a brush size of around 600 pixels, and then just start to paint my snow over the shot. And as I mentioned before, every couple of clicks we're going to click on brush settings, and then we're just going to drag the angle to anywhere else on that little circle there, and that will just help us randomize the angle that the snow is painted on it. Again, go to brush settings, just drag the angle to a different position, and then paint in the gaps until you have a good spattering of snow covering the shot. So I think that looks pretty good. We'll head up to Filter, down to Blur, and over to Gaussian Blur, and then what we're going to do is use this to soften the snow so it looks like it's a little bit out of focus. So a value of 6 pixels should be fine. We'll hit OK, and that's just softening the edges of the snow. And then we're going to add a different blur filter now. This time we're going to go to Filter, Blur, and over to Motion Blur. And this will help us give a kind of directional blur that will make it look like the snow is falling through the air. So I'm going to set the angle to about 60 degrees and then just drag the distance until it looks how you want it to. It depends how hard you want it to look like it's snowing. So I think about 150 pixels looks pretty good for this shot, and we'll hit OK. And now we're going to move on to our second snow layer, which is going to be the much smaller, finer particles of snow. So we'll head up to Layer again, over to New Layer, click OK again, and now I'm going to use the square bracket keys for a much smaller brush size, probably about 125 pixels should be fine. Again, using a white brush, and I'm just going to paint onto the image. Again, every couple of clicks we're going to randomize the angle, just like before. We're just going to try and cover the whole image with this smaller particles of snow. and just keep going until you've filled the whole frame with as much snow as you want. But I think this looks good for this shot. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to head up to Filter, Blur, and over to Gaussian Blur, just to make it look slightly out of focus. So 6 pixels again, hit OK, and then I'm going to apply the second layer of blur by going up to Blur, over to Motion Blur, and then this is how we're going to give our snow some directional blur. So again, I'm going to leave the angle exactly the same so it looks like it's falling at the same angle as those bigger snow particles, but I might just drag the distance to a lower value so that it looks a little less extreme. I think around 50-60 pixels looks okay, and we'll hit OK. Now if your snow is appearing on parts of your image where you don't want it to, you can actually remove them. So for example, I've got a bit of snow that's covering my protagonist of this shot here, and I want to get rid of that, so I'll click on the big snow layer because I can see it's a large snow particle, and then I'm going to grab the eraser tool from the toolbox, resize it with the square bracket keys, and then just paint over any parts of snow where you don't want them to appear. So it's as easy as that to add snow to your images in Photoshop. Try it out for yourself now using the free SnowBrush file.